against a police state, against racist intersectionality, against political correctness, against mob rule, against the racist socialist left, against the victimhood liars. The idiots have been in charge way too long. And that's why you're here. For the podcast you need. All for liberty all the time. Welcome to Liberty Bites Back. With your host, Brandon Imo.
From the EU Research and Innovation magazine, they have went over 5 things you need to know about the mRNA vaccines. The race for a vaccine against the novel coronavirus or SARS-CoV-2 is on, with 54 different vaccines under development, 2 of which are already being tested in humans according to the World Health Organization. And among the different candidates is a new player on the scene. mRNA vaccines. One mRNA vaccine developed by U.S. company Moderna began its first human trials on the 16th of March, whereas other development by German company CureVac had been offered 80 million euros in investment by the European Commission. But what exactly are mRNA vaccines, and why could they be promising in the fight against coronavirus? We spoke to Professor Isabelle Bekeredjian-Ding, head of the microbiology division of Germany's Paul and Roche Institute, which provides scientific advance to companies including CureVac, who sits on the scientific committee of the Europe's Innovative Medicines Initiative. Here are the 5 things to know. 1. They're a whole new type of vaccine. If an mRNA vaccine was approved for coronavirus, it would be the first of its type. It's a very unique way of making a vaccine, and so far no such vaccine has been licensed for infectious disease, said Professor Bekeredjian-Ding. Vaccines work by training the body to recognize and respond to the proteins produced by a disease-causing organism, such as a virus or bacteria. Traditional vaccines are made up of small or inactive doses of the whole disease-containing organism or the protein that it produces, which are introduced to the body to provoke the immune system into mounting a response. The mRNA vaccine, in contrast, tricks the body into producing some type of viral proteins itself. They work by using mRNA or messenger RNA, which is a molecule that essentially puts DNA instructions into action inside a cell, and mRNA is used as a template to build a protein. And mRNA basically is like a preform of a protein. Its sequence encodes what the protein is basically made of later on, said Professor Bekeredjian-Ding. To produce the mRNA vaccine, scientists produce a synthetic version of the mRNA that a virus uses to build its infectious proteins. This mRNA is delivered into the human body, whose cells reads it as instructions to build that viral protein and therefore create some of the virus's molecules themselves. These proteins are solitary, so they do not assemble to form a virus. The immune system then detects these viral proteins and starts to produce a defensive response plan to them. Number 2. They can be more potent and straightforward to produce than traditional vaccines. There are 2 parts to the immune system: initiate, the defenses we're born with, and acquired, which we develop as we come into contact with pathogens. Classical vaccine molecules usually only work with the acquired immune system, and the innate immune system is activated by another ingredient called an adjacent. Interestingly, mRNA in vaccines could trigger the innate immune system, providing an extra layer of defense without the need to add adjustants. All kinds of innate immune cells are being activated by mRNA, said the Professor Bekeredjian-Ding, and this primes the immune system to get prepared for an endangering pathogen, and thus the type of immune response that is triggered is very strong. There is still a lot of work to be done to understand the response and the length of the protection it could give and whether there are any downsides. Professor Bekeredjian-Ding also explained that because you're not introducing the whole virus into the body, the virus can't mount its own self-defense, and so the immune system can't concentrate on creating a response to the viral proteins without the interference by the virus. And by getting the human body to produce the viral proteins itself, the mRNA vaccines cut out some of the manufacturing process and should be easier and quicker to reproduce than traditional vaccines. In this situation, the major benefit is that it's easy to produce, and it will also probably be relatively easy to do upscaling of production, which of course is very important if you think about deployment throughout Europe and the world, said Professor Bekeredjian-Ding. Most of what we know about mRNA vaccines comes from work on cancer. Most work on using mRNA to provoke an immune response has so far been focused on cancer, with tumor mRNA being used to help someone's immune system recognize and respond to the proteins produced by their own specific tumors. This technology was very good on the oncology field because you can develop patient-specific vaccines because every tumor is different, said Professor Bekeredjian-Ding. Using tumor and mRNA in this way activates the body's T cells, the part of the acquired immune system that kills cells, which is useful to destroy tumors. It can be important for coronavirus too, and in viral infections, often we know that is something we need for strong T cell response, because viruses like to hide in cells, said Professor Bekeredjian-Ding. There is a certain hope that, especially in this setting, this could really work and thereby eliminate the infected cells from the body. But to combat such a SARS-CoV-2, it is likely that a different part of the acquired immune system also needs to be activated. The B cells, which produce antibodies that mark the virus out for destruction by the body, and there is experience with this. Aside from the animal infection models, because for the tumor model, this was not that relevant. There are a lot of unknowns because mRNA vaccines are only now beginning to be tested in humans. There's not a lot of fairly basic unknowns which can only be answered through human trials. What is really the current challenge, I think, is to understand whether these vaccines will really be able to mount the sufficient protected immune response to the human, and to understand, for example, which quantities of the mRNA will be needed to do this, said Professor Bekeredjian-Ding. Other outstanding questions include whether the proteins that have been chosen for the vaccine are the right ones to prevent a coronavirus infection in the body, and how targeted the immune response is to this particular coronavirus, how long any immunity would last, and whether it causes side effects such as increased inflammatory responses like redness and swelling, or in the worst case, aggravates disease. And then 5, it would be possible to vaccinate on a large scale. Once the mRNA vaccine has been approved, which could take up to 12 to 18 months, it should be easy to scale up in production because the manufacturing process is shorter than for other vaccines. Professor Bekeredjian-Ding estimates a few months rather than 1 to 2 years for conventional vaccines. There is a potential for these vaccines to be scaled up quickly. This is useful in the context of coronavirus, which is likely need mass immunization programs. I think we need a very high population coverage, but depends a little bit on the countries and the epidemiology, said Professor Bekeredjian-Ding. In the countries where the coronavirus has been spreading very fast, we also expect that there's many people who have been in contact with the virus and who have actually mounted a natural immune response. But on the other end, if you look at Germany, for example, right now we're all at home, bared, and not allowed to leave the house except for necessities. Population therefore remains unsusceptible to infection, she says. And so here, you would definitely need to think about vaccinating the whole population. That's also why these vaccines are of interest, because you could possibly manage that, while with other vaccines it's harder to produce those quantities in a short period of time. So right there, they just said they want to force these on all of us. While we already know that this is a new and a whole new type of vaccine that's never been used, they want to guinea pig us. They want to shove these mRNA vaccines into us. From Moderna, the CureVac, this is worldwide, people. These vaccines they're wanting, they've never been used on humans, and they're expecting to use them on all humans this year. At least some of these people. They're wanting it for the whole population. And this is just crazy.